As the Norse conquest of Italy progressed, Lord Reidar Ulvari, the valiant commander at the helm, maneuvered his forces across the vast fields of Latium. The grueling campaign spanned just over a year. Reidar marched his men to Rome, but failed to lay siege to the city. Receiving reports of the Pope's commander hiding up in the hilly region of Terni, they broke off the siege and marched to battle. There they would meet in the hilly passes on a hot day in the late summer. The aspiring warlord king from the far north, and the Pope's most trusted military commander, the mayor of Sani. Their troops equally numbered, the outcome was far from certain, and it could be the battle to decide the fate of Latium. However, this meeting would not prove to be anything different from previous battles of Reidar's campaigns. The commander-mayor was lost in the fray when a contingent of Reidar's troops flanked them from the left, and he was killed. Outmaneuvered and outmanned, out-axed and out-muscled, the remaining papal troops had to withdraw with what they still had. Instead of pursuing, Reidar marched south and laid siege to the castle of Tortoli. Reidar realized that they would never beat the Pope's commander by winning in battle. These people knew the land better, and traveled lighter, and so could evade any large-scale assault that the Norsemen could throw at them. If the war was to be determined by skirmishes, it would take centuries to win. Perhaps it was also the Pope's strategy, wanting to gain time until the unlikely day when the Catholic kings had settled their bickering, for them to send relief at last. However, it was not a risk Reidar was willing to take, and neither did he need to. Because even though their armies were impossible to catch, their castles could not evade them. These structures stood where they stood, and so they turned to natural targets for Reidar's troops. Reidar stopped first at the coastal settlement of Tortola, but decided to split his army into two, so that he could take southern Latium faster. Whilst Tortoli was left in the hands of 1,000 levies and a trusted commander, Reidar marched north to Tivoli, standing just east of Rome. After these two settlements fell in late summer, and after another victory at the fields of Velletri, south of Rome, nothing more stood in their path to Rome. Yet, with the passing weeks, the challenges confronting Reidar on the campaign grew ever more daunting. His armies were running close to depleting their supplies, and their reputation as bloodthirsty invaders hindered any chance of garnering support from the locals. Now, standing before the towering walls of Rome, Lord Reidar faced a dilemma. Though his forces outnumbered the city by far, his men lacked the knowledge for building siege engines. Their only option was to wait until the city had run out of food, or for a miracle to happen. Faced with this predicament, Reidar crafted a bold message addressed directly to Pope Honorius. It carried a simple, yet resolute offer. The new king of Rome has come. Open your gates and welcome us, the progenitors of a future era, or face the wrath of our swords. Days passed, but no response reached Reidar's camp. However, one morning a solitary rider emerged from the gates of Rome, bearing a request from the Pope himself, seeking a meeting with Lady Ines, Lord Reidar's mother. Cautious but curious, Reidar consented to the proposed meeting. Accompanied by a contingent of the Pope's host, Lady Ines ventured into the heart of Rome. The encounter between Lady Ines and Pope Honorius would prove to be a pivotal moment, shaping the destiny of the Norse conquest and the future of Rome, as well as Christianity itself. Inside the confines of the Holy City, discussions unfolded. And after a week of deliberations, a fragile agreement began to take shape. Lady Ines, with her profound vision of her son's destiny, presented an alternative path to the Pope. One promising the emergence of a future empire under the rule of her own dynasty, as well as that of the Pope. A glimmer of hope appeared as common ground was found. The strategic minds of Lady Ines and Pope Honorius recognized the mutual benefits that could be gained from an alliance, rather than conflict. Following her 7-day sojourn at the negotiating table, Lady Ines returned to Lord Reidar's camp, carrying a proposition that held the promise of ending the war for Latium, solidifying her son Reidar's position as the king of the Italians. However, this proposition came with a significant condition, one that would leave an indelible mark on the course of history. Lady Ines had masterfully presented her case to Pope Honorius, appealing to their common heritage and her own Catholic upbringing, and even invoking the Pope's historically weak position. Currently, the Catholics had no king. Not since Charlemagne's kingdom had splintered had there been one to take up the mantle, and within the ranks of candidates were only weaklings and sinners, of different degrees. Furthermore, the northern Italian lands were ruled by Queen Ermengarde, who had been excommunicated by the Church for flaunting her lustful temptations whilst also being a woman. The arrival of Reidar presented an alternative path. And with that, compromises could be made. The terms of the agreement were as follows. The Pope would relinquish control of his lands, with the exception of the Cardinal's Palace and the Vatican itself. In return, Lord Reidar, the new king, would convert to the faith of the land, Catholicism, and become a prodigy of Jesus, letting go of his Norse heritage. Upon hearing this proposition, Reidar was initially overcome with anger. Were it not for the protection and guidance of Freya and Odin, could he ever have achieved his victories? But Lady Ines presented a compelling argument, and the Norse warlord knew the wisdom in her words. After taking the perk of peacemaker, and after a day of deliberation, Reidar made a momentous decision and agreed to the terms of the Pope. The war was over and Latium had a new king. A king who bore the moniker of Reidar. No longer would he be known as Bastard the Banished, but as King Reidar the Lion, the founder of the Ulvaris. In December, on the year of 884, exactly 14 years after his audacious landing in Sardinia, Reidar embarked upon his most transformative journey yet. The conversion to Christianity and the rejection of his old gods would first be a source of much conflict and confusion in Reidar, but would be followed by a long period of inner peace, only to then, in the end, flare into an upset that would divide southern Europe. Beside his conversion, in a gesture of goodwill towards his newly conquered people, Reidar gave the castles of Terracina and Tivoli back to the Italian nobles who had governed them previously under the Papal States' rule. As Reidar returned to his stronghold in Cagliari, he began the proceedings to solidify his position as the rightful king of the islands and Latium. With the support of his advisors and dignitaries, preparations were made for a grand coronation ceremony. An event that would mark the official proclamation of his kingship and the forging of his kingdom. Amidst great pomp and ceremony, Reidar stood before his subjects, adorned in regal attire, as the crown was placed upon his head. The assembled crowd bore witness to the birth of a new era, as Reidar, now king, ascended to the throne, assuming the weighty responsibilities that came with the title. Despite his stated ambition to rebuild the Roman Empire, King Reidar never proclaimed Rome as the capital of his kingdom. Instead, he found solace and belonging in the enchanting city of Cagliari, the very place where he first set foot. Over a decade of residing there, Cagliari had become his cherished home, resonating with the tales his mother had shared during his youth. With the kingdom forged and Reidar firmly established as its sovereign ruler, the future of his realm seemed to hold great promise. However, challenges would undoubtedly arise. And the true test of Reidar's leadership would lie in his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of power, maintaining the delicate balance between conquest and governance. As King Reidar ascended to his newly forged throne, he faced the daunting task of securing his position and ensuring the stability of his kingdom. To safeguard against potential threats from the Queen of Italy, who viewed him as a rival, Reidar sought a strategic alliance through marriage. Unable to wed the Queen herself, he found a suitable match in the young Duchess Kriemhild of Spoleto, one of Ermengarde's esteemed vassals. Though yet too young to wed, the Duchess's mother and regent agreed to the proposal, serving also to secure their own precarious position, as the previous Duke of Spoleto had, for unknown reasons, abdicated his crown and fled to France, leaving their daughter to assume the reign at only 10 years of age. For Reidar, this union would serve as a deterrent against the Queen of Italy to attempt an invasion of Latium Sardinia, as well as to solidify the legitimacy of his rule in the region. The second step in securing his place involved dealing with disloyal vassals, particularly the two Muslim counts of Sicily who remained loyal to the previous regime. Reidar dispatched ultimatums, demanding their conversion, but when they refused, the king sent an official dispatch revoking their holdings. And knowing that they would rather rise up in rebellion, he once again prepared himself for conflict. The counts raised their armies and marched upon Palermo, the king's own stronghold on the island. However, just across the bay from Cagliari, Reidar met them on the field of battle, and leveraging superior numbers, he emerged victorious. The fields, scarred by past conflicts with the Sultanate, witnessed yet another decisive triumph for the Norse ruler. In an era where uncertainty and illness often determined a monarch's fate, it became crucial for Reidar to secure a successor to the throne, especially as he, now 34 years of age, was coming into his own middle ages. His mother, despite her own experiences as a marginalized figure on the side of a legitimate marriage, advised him to take a concubine. This despite his previous commitment to monogamy before the Pope. However, Reidar chose to wait, determined to break the cycle of sidelining bastard children. The civil war waged by the disloyal counts was swiftly quelled, and the castles of Messina and Castro Giovanni were allotted to loyal countrymen. The castle of Messina found itself in the hands of Costanzo de Lacan, a Sardinian noble. However, his reign would be short-lived, marred by accusations of demonic possessions that would soon send him packing. In an event that marked his conquest of Latium, his conversion to Christianity, and the establishment of his new kingdom, King Reidar summoned his vassals to his palace in Cagliari to offer an ear to their concerns and grievances. During this procession, Count Gualtiero proposed to arrange a festival, aimed to foster goodwill and strengthen the bonds between the indigenous inhabitants of the peninsula and their new Norse overlords. The festival, known as the Meeting of the Romans and Norse, became the first of many celebrations, and it had soon given rise to a new identity that emerged from the fusion of Roman and Norse customs, the culture that came to be known as Romanos. As King Reidar longed more desperately for an heir to his throne, his attention turned towards Lady Ermentrude, the former Queen of West Francia and mother of the kings of Aquitaine and France. Having once been kidnapped by Reidar during his raiding days, taken from Paris and now settled in Cagliari, she was an experienced mother of noble lineage. However, despite an unexpected friendship blossoming between them in later years, Ermentrude had no desire to enter into a union with the king. It became clear that Reidar would have to wait for his betrothed, Duchess Kriemhild of Spoleto, to reach the customary marriageable age of the time, 16 years of age, before the succession would be safe. With the rebellious vassals in Sicily subdued and their castles bestowed upon loyal subjects, a period of peace and reflection ensued. King Reidar embarked on journeys across his island realm, visiting vassals and partaking in feasts and hunts. These endeavors inspired him little by little to prepare a momentous event: a grand tournament in the capital. All vassals and neighboring rulers were invited, and it would be an occasion to showcase the military might of Reidar and his people, solidifying their reign in the Mediterranean region. During the phase of planning for the spectacle, the king traveled to Rome to pay respect to the Pope. King Reidar had by now become a staunch believer in his adopted religion, and went often to see the Pope, who he considered to be his friend. However, upon arrival, Reidar received alarming news of a heresy spreading rapidly on the south of the peninsula. A deviation of the scriptures known as Polycanism, a sect from the East rejecting the divinity of Christ. It was vehemently condemned by the Pope, who granted approval for any Catholic leader to intervene militarily. However, as the Christian world remained fragmented, Francia torn between warring brothers, each inciting rebellions against the other, and Italy still under the yoke of an ungodly woman as proclaimed by the Pope, it was in the eyes of many, King Reidar who appeared as the logical choice to confront these challenges. Yet it would have to wait. For now, his focus lay on the grand tournament in Cagliari, planned for the following year of 887. The tournament promised a spectacle of epic proportions. A melee featuring teams composed of knights and courtiers and servants. Even the king himself would participate, alongside over 100 contestants, hailing from various realms and noble families. The air was thick with anticipation as the tournament approached, embodying the martial spirit and prowess of the era. The summer of 887 arrived, and the grand tournament burst to life with a symphony of bustling sounds. The air was filled with excitement as the horn sounded, marking the commencement of the first day of competition. Among the participants, a diverse array of noble warriors and esteemed courtiers had gathered, each representing their respective realms and families. And at the forefront of the spectacle stood King Reidar himself, a commanding figure exuding strength and determination. As the days passed, the tournament unfolded as a remarkable fusion of fierce combat and joyous celebration. The participants engaged in battle during the sunlit hours, showcasing their martial prowess and vying for victory. Yet, as night descended upon the tournament grounds, the revelry commenced. The atmosphere came alive with raucous parties, where camaraderie and merriment flourished. Amidst one of these spirited gatherings, King Reidar's gaze fell upon a young and captivating figure. She was a servant in the retinue of the Countess of Gallura, possessed of both youth and beauty that immediately captivated the king's attention. It was a chance encounter that left an indelible mark upon his memory. The following day, amidst the clashing of weapons and the thunderous cheers of the crowd, Reidar's eyes once again locked with the mesmerizing gaze of the young servant. Fate seemed to intertwine their paths, bringing them together amidst the fervor of the tournament. But as their eyes met, she stumbled on an errant spear and fell. The king pressed quickly through the crowd of struggling bodies and swept her up. From the first touch, their tale would be one for the poets throughout the ages. Despite their 20 years age gap, it would befall Reidar to pursue the love of this young lady. Though he was already engaged to be married in 3 years, and the young Georgia was a lowborn, she soon moved to the king's court, on his own request. Between them a romance would blossom, though hidden away from the eyes of the world. On the last week of the spectacle, it stood between two teams still standing. That of the king, and that of his vassal, the Count of Tivoli. However, it was no longer just a meeting between the prowess of men and their weapons, but a judgment of faiths. Count Fabrizio had recently been accused of abandoning his Catholic upbringing, and having adopted the new fad of Polycanism. A rank taste of betrayal lingered between them. As the second to last day of competition commenced, the two sides met. Reidar saw the Count be struck off his horse and land in a cloud of dust. This was the opportunity to finish it, he thought, but seeing the little man struggle to stand up, he couldn't charge at him. Dismounting his horse, he stepped up with drawn sword, ready for a duel with the Count. Fabrizio turns to face him, a tiny man, overborne in the suit of metal chain. He looks pale and frightened as he raises his shield to block Reidar's attack. On a 99% success chance, the precious 0 point something must once in a while excel. A horse, racing past, kicks up a stone that slams into the side of the king's head. He falls sideways, knocked out for a moment, but by the time he gets up again, it's too late. The Count has already proclaimed himself the victor. Not just a showdown between men, this outcome was a disaster. Leaving the king's team in a precarious spot, the last day of fighting approaches rapidly. It still stands between his team and Count Fabrizio's. On the very last day of July, the horn blows for the last duel to begin. The two sides clash in a frenzy of ringing steel. But as noon draws past, there stands a clear winner. His sword is raised to the sun. The king is lauded in the celebrating applause of the onlookers. Amongst them he sees his subjects, cheering gladly for their king, victorious in the eyes of everybody. He sees his mother, Lady Ines, proud as a mother can be. And beyond them all, he sees those pretty eyes. The eyes of Georgia, and her kind smile, invite the very life of love. After the conclusion of the tournament, the reign of Reidar appears to know no bounds of glory. From this point forward, as we will see in the next episode, further conquest awaits him, both through the use of sword and diplomacy. But as the 10th century looms on the horizon, the king will find himself on the precipice of a profound spiritual shift, as doubts of deep concern begin to take root inside his soul.